They make the intangible tangible. The creative path and journey is to some degree to say yes and figure it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Shaun Fynn started Studio Fynn nearly 30 years ago as an industrial design practice. Trained at Central St. Martin's. Early clients like Nike, Motorola and Acco brands. And then he stopped asking what we design and started asking why. Studio Fynn became a research and visual storytelling practice for Steelcase, Coca-Cola and Lixil. But here is the move most studios would never make. He turned the camera away from the product entirely. He self-funded a documentary about the people who live and work on top of e-waste landfills in Delhi. He calls it the world of the receiver. He spent 3 years photographing a Le Corbusier city, turning research and documentary into an art form.
It was picked up by The Guardian and many other sources as one compositional piece that told the story.
So I asked him the thing his clients in the furniture world might not have wanted to hear. What did you find that maybe the furniture industry wasn't ready to hear?
That's a good question. The generational side of things, I think is one point if you were to look at millennials. One thing we discovered was, there was a lot of negative talk of millennials.
Shaun said one thing in his conversation that I just keep coming back to.
When I was younger, I thought design had the power to do it all.
This episode is about what design actually is once you stop compartmentalizing it. Not products, not decks. Observation first, then everything else. And the quiet truth that good work rarely comes from design alone. It comes from working with the people, the disciplines, and the world around it. This is Why Design. Shaun Fynn, welcome to Why Design. We're in a nicely air-conditioned office in Brooklyn, just around the corner from Dumbo, where it's wrapping up for NYC by Design later today. So great to be in the room with you. So Shaun, I want to start where you started. Now, you started Studio Fynn nearly 30 years ago.
It's getting up there,
Originally as an industrial design practice, and it's evolved into something quite different today. So perhaps you could take a few minutes to introduce yourself, walk us through that arc, and then tell us what Studio Fynn actually is today.
First of all, nearly 30 years, I guess it is. Studio Fynn I started back in the late 90s, purely as an industrial design practice. And my background was a graduate from Central St. Martin's in industrial design. I practiced with other, big studios around the world, including Design Continuum at the time. I was in London, Milan, Los Angeles for, 8 years across those, actually even a little more across those three places. And then in the late 90s, I thought, well, I kind of, want to do my own thing. So hence Studio Fynn. I was based in Los Angeles at the time. So, my initial thought was to set it up as an industrial design practice, is what I did. Initial clients included Acco brands, Nike, Motorola, a lot of big names. But I think also one of my initial breaks in terms of, getting recognition for the studio was a chair I designed for Driade in Italy called the Mono chair. So that gave, a lot of exposure to the studio at the time. After a number of years in the actual, design business, or purely in the design, kind of the design of products, etc., I was like more starting to question why we do things, not just what are we doing. And that led to the research practice. And, I'd lived in 4 countries, the UK, Italy, US, and actually 3 years in India. I can get onto that a little bit later. But I was noticing that, in a lot of ways, culture defines meaning. And what we were designing for maybe one market or one culture wasn't relevant to the other. So, that also made me look at design in a deeper way. So that's sort of the origin, and then evolving to storytelling. And we'll get onto that a little bit later.
You mentioned you've lived in the UK, Italy, India, and now in the US. What does living across kind of 4 cultures actually do for your design instincts?
I think it really tunes them really well,
Mhm.
but I also think it makes you a stronger observer.
Yeah.
And I think it also makes you possibly more empathetic to differences.
Mhm.
When there's a monoculture or an individual culture, there's kind of an assumption, especially from designers, that the world is like this. And it's not.
Mhm.
You know, the world is very different in different places. And I think as we become more global, both in our, you know, careers and the clients we serve, I do think we have to take that into account.
Yeah, huge. I mean, even just look at us, you know, Brits in New York. You know, we we speak the same language, you know,
Yeah,
but there's so many very obvious but very subtle differences as well, just in
yeah,
terms of the cultures there. And then yeah, when you look at India and Italy and places like, you know, there's more apparent, but there is a thread actually with the you know, some of the people I've interviewed for the podcast
mhm,
that um, those who have, you know, been super successful, had, you know, great brands on their portfolio, it's that international travel and living and working abroad. That's like the central kind of
yeah,
pillar
yeah,
to it
yeah,
all. So yeah, when I hear that designer friends of mine are sending their kids to kind of, or their kids are going to university abroad, it's like, yeah, that's amazing, because it does give you that
Well,
extra
it gives you
insight.
exposure, I think,
Yeah,
also to very different industries.
yeah,
I mean, you know, my first years in the US, I was based in California and working at
mhm,
lots of technology companies.
yeah,
That wasn't an exposure you would have got in the UK or Italy. So it added something really quite different
mm,
to the experience.
absolutely, absolutely. So, if one of your clients were to describe what Studio Fynn does today, you know, in one line, what would you like them to say?
They make the intangible tangible.
Is that your actual strapline?
No, it was actually, that was a description that was, I did not actually invent that. It came
Yeah.
from a client. It came from
Uh,
Steelcase.
oh, amazing.
Yeah, one of the design directors there who I used to
Yeah.
work with was a big fan of the studio, and
Yeah.
that's how he would bring us in as like
Huh.
kind of this additional voice.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing. I was going to ask you about Steelcase actually on the next section. So that does kind of segue quite nicely.
yeah,
You know, you've said that research was a way to search for the meaning of what we do as designers. Say, I'm joining in here as the non-designer, but you know,
yeah.
the why. You know,
Mhm.
let's talk through that. So talk through kind of what that actually looks like when a major brand brings you in. And maybe we could talk about the still case.
Yeah. I mean, it can uh, look like a lot of different things, but I think primarily Studio Fynn is involved in a lot of future thinking, um, kind of big picture
Yeah.
research. We're doing things that may understand how culture or generational things or
Hmm.
world events such as the pandemic may impact how a brand thinks about its design, how it thinks about its marketing,
Yeah.
how it thinks about its communications. To go a little bit back to the origin of the Steelcase, I mean, our first projects with Steelcase were smaller ones, like exploring what's the definition of a private office, right?
Hmm.
So you just look at, you know, value systems, behaviors within that particular context. We then also did projects around just things like power delivery in, you know, interior spaces or offices, because you're looking at quite complex product ecosystems that are between architecture and product, right? So if you innovate in that space, you're kind of looking to think about, well, where does the product stop and the architecture begin?
Hmm.
At what point of the business cycle, you know, can you get into that particular market,
Hmm.
right? Um, it depends on your client, right? The
Yeah.
Steelcase is not a construction company, so we end up being there at the point of architectural installation and beyond.
Mm.
Um, and then leading to finally, we did a really big project, the Steelcase in India.
Mm.
Because actually, in my own experience, I've worked with the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad in
Hmm.
India over the last 20 years. And we were just looking to, Steelcase was looking at global markets more
Hmm.
seriously around 2012. And they just came to Studio Fynn with our experience, and we're in competition with a number of other studios.
Hmm.
And they selected us to basically go to India and kind of give a cultural point of view on how to design for the
Mm.
Indian workplace. So very, very broad
Yeah.
questions, but I think those kind of research projects are kind of there to validate, are we making the right business decisions, or
Hmm.
the right strategy decisions? What kind of potential products, how do we even approach the market?
Yeah.
Becomes, you know, the kind of questions that they're quite concerned with.
And when it came to Steelcase in India, and what were the questions, or the question that they couldn't answer themselves?
I think when you look at international markets, and particularly India, you'd see that, global corporations have a similar footprint wherever they go in the world, right? If it's Google or it's ExxonMobil, whatever it is, their offices may tend to duplicate, right?
Yeah.
But they're a really tiny section of the market. I mean, I couldn't give you an exact number, but they're in a single digit percentage, right? So we're looking to see, well, what is the actual main market? What is it now? What might it become, right? So we're looking at those kind of opportunities to see how we would address them. You might be able to say deal with a Google through a single point on an international level, but a new tech company in India or marketing organization might only be located there at this point.
Yeah.
So you have to look at their kind of current needs. So
interesting. And you worked with Coca-Cola as well, didn't you? In Mexico City.
Mexico City, yeah. I mean, Coca-Cola was an interesting client because we were introduced to them through a former director of cultural insights, and he would just love the work Studio Fynn was doing, and he was like, "Well, I'll introduce you to the organization." And one of the first projects we did was a research project in Mexico City, which was kind of a cross between ethnography and documentary. And what we were tasked to do is a day in the life of 8 people. So go and understand people's lives. What do they do at home? What do they do in the office? How do they interact with their family? So we're kind of looking at it. It is a kind of a way of sort of consumer profiling, obviously, but we're just looking at value systems, right? So that kind of research can inform products, services, or even campaigns. Especially for a company like, Coca-Cola, not a product company, so to speak. So they're looking at very, very broad cultural indicators. And that then led on to actually going into full communication projects. So then we were then asked to do the sustainability communications campaign, talking about how do they articulate purpose and sustainability to their external audiences.
We hear a lot from successful design agencies, big and small, where one piece of work will often naturally lead into another. Let me interrupt for 30 seconds with something most hardware founders learn the hard way. The skills that get you from prototype to product are not the same skills that get you from product to scale. That transition is where leadership matters. At Kodu, we help physical product companies hire senior leaders who can formalize roadmaps, build world-class teams, and align product with commercial strategy. Director, VP, C-suite. If you are entering a new category, raising capital, or professionalizing your product function, this is not a hire to rush. So find me, Chris White, on LinkedIn, and let's talk before you make the call. Typically, if you're doing the research right at the beginning, you're in a well positioned for the client to turn around and go, "That's great. Research is great. Go and do it." Now go and build the thing or the brand or whatever it might be.
I also think it's about building a relationship. So maybe sometimes the smaller projects, give a demonstration of capabilities and what the relationship can do. Once you demonstrate that, and I think what Studio Fynn had evolved to become and is still doing so is full-on communication and storytelling. And to a client like Coca-Cola, that's a vital component. And they see a company like Studio Fynn as a creative resource and don't particularly compartmentalize industrial design, packaging, or any particular disciplines, because we're kind of tasked to do, again, much higher level. I ended up being the actual copywriter for the campaign, along with, organizing the team around video production, animation, graphics. So it turns into kind of quite a different world, but it's all within the creative wheelhouse. Well, an example I would always use is, if you go back to, Charles and Ray Ames, they did everything. They were architects, product designers, filmmakers, exhibition designers. There wasn't particularly a need to compartmentalize how they could express what they needed to do or what the client was asking. So I like to operate in that particular vein.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't talked about it, but tell me how big is Studio Fynn now? Because that's obviously there's a lot of capability there, but my understanding is you're quite a lean outfit, aren't you?
Yeah, we're a small team. We usually stay with a core of around 3 or 4. Some projects we've had larger teams up into, 12 to 15.
Yeah.
Um, I would often just scale up with, the particular demand,
Mm-hmm.
or around a particular project. And the other thing we've done over the years is build a model of creative collaboration with
Yeah.
certain people, like super high-end video editors or whoever it might
Mm-hmm.
be. That, we don't necessarily carry that much work in-house.
Yeah.
We've found that that model worked with creatives because a lot of creatives don't want to be part of a full-time team,
Yeah.
especially if they're really good at certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think the pandemic almost validated that business model, because now everyone's quite comfortable with working globally with
Yeah. Yeah.
resources, etc., and client expectation is fine with that too.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I'm just thinking of anyone that's listening or watching that's just thinking, oh, I'd love to do some research, I'd love to do some insights work, but what if I get too busy? They almost put themselves off because of the size of the team. The typical design agency is like less than 5 heads.
Yeah.
So it's like, what if I can't deliver? And that anxiety comes in.
I think that, as you gain with your experience, I think you know how to gauge that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's always that fine line, and it's the creative path and journey is to some degree to say yes and figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's that figuring out part that is your professionalism and your experience that allows you to gauge whether that is feasible,
Mm-hmm.
And I think many things are feasible these days, becoming more and more feasible with the
Absolutely, yeah.
the technologies, and the comfort level with the client for that expansion.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of figure outable stuff now. With AI. As long as you can, know roughly where you're going and what the output needs to look like.
Yeah.
I had coffee with a industrial designer earlier this week, and he was telling me about a project that he was doing as a buzz project, and he was programming the circuit board. He was doing the firmware and the software, getting all the motors to work, and he'd never touched that in his life. But because he knew what he wanted the thing to do, he knew how to articulate that to Claude to get it to write code. And it's like,
I also work with coders and things like that. It's not my world, but I know what the end vision should be. And my job is to put all the pieces together to get to that. And I just think time and the international experience and being able to work across different kind of media. I mean, I'm personally comfortable in the industrial design medium, the research. I'm also, full-on photographer, filmmaker as well. I'm comfortable with all of those things.
There's a lot of stuff you've figured out.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Do you remember the first research project you did, and how did that come about? I'm just thinking, anyone thinking, I'd love to do research. I think I can do it, but I don't know how to land my first gig.
Well, as actually it was interesting. It was Bosch Siemens was my first research.
Start small then. Yeah.
Well, they've been a contact. The US office has been a contact, and we'd been sort of talking along these lines of, with potentially product design consulting, etc., with them. And the first thing that came up was like, well, we're investing more in the US. We need to know a little bit more about US competitors, and we need to know a bit about design culture in the US because, we want to invest more. And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. And, just got into it, and it was really fascinating.
Yeah.
It really made me look at design in a different way. And it also gave me a really good point of view to how to look at design from your client's angle, not from a designer's angle, which is, I think, is a major consideration.
Yeah.
Right? So
absolutely. Wonderful. Final question around around this then. So, HNI and KI, you've done some long studies on millennials, the future of the workspace, the future of educational institutions.
Yeah.
What did you find that maybe the furniture industry wasn't ready to hear?
That's a good question. The generational side of things, I think is one point if you were to look at millennials. One thing we discovered was, there was a lot of negative talk of millennials. If you were to just do some secondary research and look at some publications and things. But we organized, I think, about 28 different interviews and office sites to look at millennials and understand their values. And, the overriding thing was that there was a positivity and a new way of thinking and
Mhm.
productivity in that work that I don't think traditional companies were looking at. You know, looking at, say, work with KI and some of the educational institution, we were looking at two big things. One was a really big picture. We spent a year looking around educational institutions in the US and how they're changing. And I think the idea of how, in many ways, institutions themselves are becoming a brand, you know, and what is it that they are articulating to their potential students, to the world about their institution.
Yeah.
So, and it's not usually through the furniture. It's the furniture is actually facilitating the environments that they wish to communicate.
Yeah.
Right. So things like, you know, how the library is sort of transitioning from, it's always been a temple of knowledge. If you look at, you know, Cambridge libraries or ancient libraries from hundreds of years, even thousands of years, you know, are fascinating places. But now technology is coming into that. And we're trying to navigate that world of how we understand physical environment and product design within that context, which is a big, I think, undertaking. And I think the other thing is, you know, if you look at how institutions now publicize themselves, educational ones, you know, it's not really, you know, the rough and tough classroom or something like that that you see. It'll be the preeminent engineering facilities and that are architectural statements. And, you know, I mean, we tend to call it all signature spaces. How do you address that and design for it? So,
Brilliant. So let's talk about strategy a bit more, like the strategy deck to documentary. You know, most research practices stop at the report. You did not. You moved into documentary, into film, into exhibition design. So yeah, help us understand why and what it gives a client that a deck never will.
Yeah, a presentation deck, right? PDF. I mean, we do that, you know, and it's down to where the client decides is their ask, what's the scope of the project, you know. We have our way of articulating the work. I mean, initially we were doing design research around products, right? But as Studio Fynn has grown and our experience has, we try to articulate our recommendations over, you know, marketing, design, and business decisions. And then we also articulate over horizons. Like, what can you do in 1 year? What can you do in 5 years? So that becomes strategic, right? Strategic thinking. And the other side of stuff we do is, you know, we've done our own self-sponsored documentary in India about electronic waste.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, looking at the both the social and environmental impact of product design and what I'd like to call the receiver, the world of the receiver. Because, well, we're very good, right, at producing, manufacturing, and developing brands, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of step 1 or 2. We don't spend much time on looking at who receives things once they are done, right? Once they've finished their active life. So whilst we're living in India, because I was based there full time for 3 years, actually with my wife, who was a data analyst and PhD economist, etc. Actually operations research specifically. We were looking at situation in Delhi and we were going past these particular landfill sites in the north, actually it's the eastern Delhi called Valaswar. And they're some of the biggest dumps or landfill sites in the world.
Right.
And, you know, there's little people working on top of them, a couple of 100 feet high. And you do start to wonder when you live in let's say, the global south or emerging economies, the impact of consumption on those countries and societies is considerably harder than it is on our own.
Yeah.
And, you know, we started working with an NGO there called Chintan who guided us into, you know, the world of who works on this. Who are these people working on these sites and what's their life all about? And so that kind of project is a documentary. And the purpose of that is to kind of, first step is to bring awareness, right? If we bring awareness to a situation, then we can put a strategy to it and we can start doing things. So step 1 is awareness. You know, so that project, I wouldn't say, you know, we solved the world's e-waste problem. No, we haven't, but we've brought it to a larger market, a larger audience. And then hopefully then people and companies can make more conscious decisions, you know, moving forward.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
What's the difference in practice between, making a presentation and making a piece of visual storytelling?
Um, well, a presentation can often just be seen as a document of what you've done.
Yeah.
Visual storytelling, I think, understands media that you're using and the audience in which you're speaking to.
Yeah.
Right. And, the stakeholders, we need to learn to talk to stakeholders. And that's what visual storytelling
Yeah.
combined with strategy can be used for,
Mhm.
So,
We run storytelling workshops as well.
mhm,
We caught up at the Lixil Centre
yeah,
earlier this week. So you've worked with companies like Lixil.
yeah.
What's the thing that the internal teams can't see about their own brand that an outside storyteller like yourself can?
Um, I think when you're internal in a large organization, I think the day to day, forces you to think internally,
Mm,
and there's methods by which you go through the gates and the processes of getting projects done.
mhm,
And there's different stakeholders, different people. I think an external organization like Studio Fynn can come in and really help with just basically saying, hang on a minute, have you thought about looking at it this way? And really, if you want to get this through the marketing kind of system of the company, maybe you got to reframe it,
mm,
and it's that reframing part of it that I think is how we use our expertise in visual storytelling and also our experience with working with companies like Coca-Cola.
mhm.
They're kind of masters of framing many things in many ways. So,
Yeah, absolutely. You can tell us about a story that maybe you've told about your work. Oh, sorry. What's the story that you've told through your work that you think actually shifted a business decision?
um, well, I think a lot of the, you know, international research helps
Mhm.
inform those business decisions,
Yeah.
like, and generational stuff like, should we address this market or should we not?
Mhm.
What are the risks of getting in here? Like one of the things, the Steelcase in India, you realize that a lot of the current office designs are served by custom fabricated
Mhm.
office designs, not
Yeah.
even by multinational companies.
Hmm.
Well, how do you get in on that? They've got a 2-week delivery time or 4-week delivery time, and
Yeah.
your mass manufactured stuff is taking a lot longer. So I think there's multiple things like, should we be in this market? Should we not? What
Mm,
would the strategy be if these are the components of that market?
mm. Okay, awesome. Let's talk about your books then. So you said that the books that you've written or that it's photography, isn't it?
Yeah.
In many ways, they're some of your most significant works. You know, um,
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting because, throughout my career, I think I've always been a visual storyteller,
yeah,
photographer, artist as well. I don't make a big distinction between design and art.
mm,
I don't spend much time trying to say one is different to the other. It used to be an obsession many years ago to people to, you know, say there's a big difference. But the common element I see between designers and artists is their power.
mhm,
Ultimately, is their powers of observation,
yeah,
right? Um, it comes down to that. Now, artists and designers may articulate that observation differently,
mhm,
but I think the power of observation is kind of a core thing. And with the books, I had the opportunity when I was living in India. I was actually living in Chandigarh. I was based there for 3 years, and I'm living in Corbusier's greatest project and largest project. And the longer I lived there, I realized, God, the story of this place has never really been told. This sort of
mm,
collision of European modernism, Indian culture, and what has it become?
mm,
Not what did Corbusier intend?
yeah,
And so it became fascinating to me, particularly because I was always into social realism
mhm,
uh, and humanism, those movements in photography, which have a good basis in British culture and also French, actually. And I thought, well, I'm going to use the camera. I'm going to tell the story of this city in a way that I don't think has been
mhm,
told. So I spent about 3 years during the whole time there, like photographing and
mm,
my own time outside of really any commercial. It wasn't initially a commercial project.
yeah,
And then when I came back to the US, I actually got it published with Princeton Architectural Press and Map in Publishing.
mm,
But I think what that book was, it's called Chandigarh Revealed,
mhm,
Corbusier City Today. It really was a hugely in-depth piece of research about urbanism, about design, about culture, about, I would call it the life between the walls, how people live.
Yeah.
Know? And then looking at that with architectural intentions. And photography itself becomes an art form just in itself. And then the second book I did is a compilation of all my work in India, because I've been photographing it for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit more, towards broader subjects and urbanization, work, spirituality, all these kind of things. It's been an outlet that has really allowed me to, basically do my own projects. I mean, you think that most of our careers are spent doing client work.
Yeah.
And it was just really interesting to choose a project that you're going to do yourself. And it's quite liberating to do it, because you can do it with the parameters that you want,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think David Bowie said something along the lines that you create your best work that way, when you listen to yourself and not others.
Before we get back to the episode, something most teams realize too late. Keyword matching does not build hardware. Experience does. At Kodu, we specialize in senior contract designers and engineers who have actually shipped complex products. People we know, people we've worked with for years, people we can reference confidently. We assess beyond the CV: technical depth, commercial awareness, ability to deliver under pressure. Yes, we can turn a search round in under 24 hours, but the shortlist is tight for a reason. If you need senior contract firepower that is properly vetted and fully compliant, message me directly on LinkedIn. I often find my creative outlet is music, and I find when I try and force myself to sit down and write music, it's a chore. But when it comes to you naturally, when it's organic, the shower thoughts, for instance, then it becomes fun, because then it's a puzzle to take that one little kind of melody that's in your head or a line or something and turn it into something great.
It's important for creatives to understand that it is a process, where there's a lot of mistakes along the way. I'd love to comment. I went to see Martin Parr speak. He's recently passed, but he was obviously the head of the Magnum Photo Agency and a fantastic photographer. And he spoke here at Yale, and he started off by saying something like, well, most of my photos are crap, And that there's a realism to that, because you have to take a lot of images or make a lot of prototypes or try and write a lot of songs to arrive at.
It's iterative,
Yeah. And I think maybe those things are sometimes forgotten,
So obviously your wife is Indian. I think she's from India, but she lives with you in New York, I'm guessing. But what kept you going back to India, kind of all those times for 20 years?
I think of just a fascination with visual culture.
Yeah.
I think for anyone who's tuned into visual culture, which I think all designers are, artists, etc., I think India just becomes fascinating.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of a rich layering of life and fabric of life. It's just fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say when we were introduced by Claudia, she sent me your LinkedIn profile, and I think your cover image is the one with the guy wearing the yellow turban against a yellow wall.
Yeah, it's a composition. It's a photograph I took of the High Court in Chandigarh, one of Corbusier's magnificent buildings. And that particular image has been kind of we call it the hero shot. It was picked up by The Guardian and many other sources as one compositional piece that told the story.
It's such a striking image.
And I personally love the composition, the relationship of it. Actually, in some of my other ventures, I'm now using just abstracting the composition of images to make large-scale wall art or textiles, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, they kind of have there's a derivative of that composition.
Did you get a chance to walk around the ICFF in the last few days?
Some of it, yeah.
There's a lot of big kind of textile displays there.
I think it's fascinating, I mean, I look at storytelling, I think over the decades I've done a lot of it with traditional media, photography, animations, film, and things like that. I'm now looking at a new venture called Apertura, which is about the art of storytelling through the built environment. It's like looking at architectural space and looking at how do we use that as a way to transform experiences of that space, resonate, tell brand and cultural stories, and also democratize art. I think is, I think art can go beyond the gallery. So that's the mission.
Yeah. So what's the bet that you're taking then with Apertura? It's a new venture. Why now, and kind of where is it?
I think it's a kind of Studio Fynn is that kind of commercial design and research agency, right? Storytelling, and there's always been this fine art aspect to my work, and I think it just merging those two, really, because right now they're kind of quite separate, And Apertura, I think, is a conversation that allows us to look at that merging of those things. But I also think that art in public space or storytelling and visual storytelling through architecture is actually becoming a much bigger thing. I think people are realizing, that it's another potential outlet.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, really. Obviously, I have hardware brands and design studios on the show as the kind of the main guest, but it all starts with research.
And before that, it starts with observation. Right. That's something, because I also teach at adjunct professor at Parsons School of Design here in New York City, and what I teach primarily is observation, because without that, you won't see anything. There was a great line. There's a great quote, because when I was doing my research in Chandigarh, I interviewed one of Corbusier's team, who was 93 at the time. He's since passed. His name is M.N. Sharma. And he must have been, in his late teens, early 20s when he worked on the Chandigarh project. And I asked him, I said, God, you worked with Corbusier. That's amazing. Tell me all about it. What did he say to you? And Sharma said, well, he said nothing. He said, everything is there. If you deserve it, you will see it. And I thought, that's actually quite brilliant.
Yeah.
So you think it's very arrogant at first, but it just says, look, if you can't open your eyes and you don't see it, the onus is on you to find out. So that is, I think, the origin to me of good design, good research, good storytelling. All of those things is the powers of observation.
Wow. Yes, that's deep.
It's simple in another way.
Simple and deep, yeah.
Just tuning yourself into it.
Yeah.
I think maybe someday walk down a street and don't look at your phone. I look at Union Square and I see people, everyone's walking along looking at their phone. So what if you just change your routine one day and
just look up?
Else?
I caught myself doing it because I go to London a lot, and you're always looking at maps, trying to figure out where you need to go. But it's like you start looking up, you're like, wow, look at the variety in the skyline, the architecture, the stuff you'll see that you just miss every day with your head in your phone.
And all of these things around you are, the decisions of human endeavor, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So
incredible. Well, let's go through the last bit before we wrap up. I'm going to throw some quickfire questions at you. A photographer or filmmaker who has shaped how you see the world?
I think a couple of photographers, actually. One French photographer, Marc Ribot, and obviously Cartier-Bresson, part of that humanist movement.
Yeah.
And I just think the way they just went off to travel the world, and their just appetite for exploration.
Sounds pretty cool.
Filmmakers, numerous ones.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A city that taught you something that you could not have learned anywhere else?
I think Milan, actually. I think Milan was a good kind of lesson in design. And it was also the first time I'd lived outside the UK. And, whenever you grow up in one particular country, you're kind of taught to think that that's the best way to do it. And then when you move to another, you realize, oh, maybe they've got better ways of doing things.
Yeah.
And I just also thought that just the quality of design throughout, I think from objects to buses to everything, was so well done in it, in the DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. Which of your books would you put into your client's hands first?
Depends who the client is. Generally, if they're more to do with the design and the architecture work, it would be the Chandigarh Revealed book. If it's a client that may be more interested in, artwork or let's say purpose of social cause, maybe the second one. Yeah.
Okay. Have you got any? I don't know if you're able to answer this on record, but have you got any more books in the works?
Not immediately, but there will be some. I'm formulating ideas around what that would be.
Yeah.
But I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
When it's a little more formulated.
Yeah, keep us posted. The thing strategy decks always get wrong.
They're too long.
Yeah, that's fair.
They don't understand their audience.
Yeah.
Probably the primary things.
Yeah. A question you always ask a client in the first meeting.
Why are we doing this? Sometimes it's not always the best thing, but
why am I here?
Why am I here? Yeah. Not so directly as that, but I need to understand what is the motive for the project. Is it, is it a big picture? What is the organization trying to understand? The work we're doing together. I mean, product briefs can be often more specific, right?
Yeah.
Than say a research brief. So if it's research, you kind of need to know, well, what's our objective here? Is it more about marketing, communications? Is it more about detail on the product design?
Yeah.
So finding those things out up front helps you make sure that the actual deliverable is impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. See, the same in my world. Okay, this is a fun one. Best meal in any of the 4 countries you've lived in?
Ooh, that's a good one. There's a fantastic thali place in Ahmedabad.
Okay.
In Gujarat.
Yeah.
Is it a MG House? I think is the place. It's particularly good. And then I would say some of the pesce crudo in southern Italy. Puglia. Yeah.
Stunning.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to end on this question. It's something that you believed about design at 25 that you no longer believe.
I think when you're younger, you believe design has more power than maybe it really does. And or you think singularly that design can change something. What I think I now learn with experience is, and especially in the world we're now moving into, is that if we want to have true impact, we need to understand working with other disciplines. We need to understand legislation. We need to understand government. We need to understand science.
Yeah.
Right? Because those are the challenges we face. If you're doing, something about maybe design for decarbonization, which I'm also on the board of an organization that's about that, we're only going to have success when we integrate policymakers with designers and engineers. When I was younger, I thought design had the power to do it all.
No, you need the community. You need it all to come together. Shaun, I've really enjoyed our conversation. But before we close, I want listeners to know how to follow you, follow what you're building, where to find Studio Fynn, Apertura, the books, and where to follow your photography. So, what's the best way to reach out and find out all that?
Yeah, well, you can find Studio Fynn. It's just studiofynn.com.
Yeah.
Apertura is apertura-art.com. And maybe I can put something on the video, just to a link to show you where to find us on Instagram.
Yeah, we're talking about collaboration with audience because you're going to be augmenting the video for this with stock footage. Yeah,
so
much appreciated, and we'll put obviously all the links in the show notes as well. But Shaun Fynn, thank you so much for being on Why Design.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Why Design. If this episode gave you some new ideas, share it with someone in your team who'd find it useful. And follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you're building a product team or looking for your next challenge in design or engineering, that's exactly what we do at Kodu. We help companies hire smarter and faster and help great talent find work that actually fits. I'm Chris White. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's keep raising the bar for design leadership. Until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep asking, why design?